The following video contains spoilers for Hyper Light Drifter and Yume Nikki. It also discusses dying in life with a mental illness. Viewer discretion is advised. Imagine you're 11, maybe 12 years old. It's probably around midnight and everyone in your house has gone to sleep. You're sitting at your family computer and all the lights are off in the house except for the one at your desk. You look outside into the backyard from your chair and see that somehow invisible border between the last shreds of light from the porch and the darkness. Overwhelmed with the feeling, but you can't put your finger on what that feeling is. Are you scared? Yes. Sad? Also yes. Feeling small, isolated, insignificant, worthless, helpless. Now you're drowning. You can't stop staring at the darkness. There's nothing out there, and you are nothing in here. You can't breathe, you can't scream. You're dying, somehow faster than before, but not quite fast enough. Each second an hour, each hour a blink. You could implode, or explode, or shatter, or melt, or just evaporate at any moment from the immense and crushing pressure of this infinitesimally insignificant moment that somehow has cascaded into centuries of agonizing waiting for your skull to erupt with a geyser of blood and jagged daggers of skull fragments, for your soul to cannon out of your wretched, gaping mouth and into the heavens, shrieking in horror and relief, until it reaches the end of the universe. It turns back to see the void before you, behind you, and around you, forever and ever and ever and ever. I wouldn't come to understand it for almost 2 decades. Thankfully, I understand it now. In my early 20s, I called it existential dread. It would still hit me from time to time, but at odd hours, not always in the dark, not always when I was alone. It wasn't until I was almost 30 that I found the real answer. It came from the mouth of a woman sitting in a reclining chair in a pleasant cream-colored office. Clinical depression, likely starting around the age of 11, maybe 12. But before I received that diagnosis and started on the road out of the death spiral I had lived in for nearly 20 years, there were these moments of clarity. They came in the form of video games. When I encountered them, it was as though someone could see me, and not in the horrible, dreadful way that I feared, but in a beautiful and comforting way. It was a reassurance somehow, some way. Someone out there understood how I felt. And they did this without ever saying a word. Hyper Light Drifter. Released in 2016 by Heart Machine, it gained popularity partly because of its crushing difficulty, being called the Dark Souls of 2D indie games, because of course everything at that time was, but also because its story contains no written words. I first heard about the game through a Super Bunny Hop video, where he complained about the game running at 30 FPS and how that undermined the twitchy fast-paced combat. I didn't end up buying the game until after it was patched, and I could run it at a cool 60 frames. But from what I understand, they literally had to rewrite the entire game in a different engine to accomplish this. That's neither here nor there. The main thing is, from the moment I turned on the game, well, I I was hooked completely. The oppressive visuals and sound, the protagonist is suffering from an undisclosed illness that they seem to just live with, and they don't seem to question. It's just everything. They persevere. I found myself enjoying the challenge of combat, yes, but then you'd reach moments like this one. When you meet NPCs, a text box doesn't appear, but instead you're shown a series of pictures. They talk in paintings, and it leaves so much to the imagination. The stories they tell are of a similar theme: survival, despair. There's a hopelessness that is expressed throughout the game in a way that I felt I understood in my deepest soul. All the NPCs you meet are survivors, either of the ancient war or from one of the 4 regions where some sort of ongoing genocide is happening. The decrepit corpses of the past and the freshly gored bodies of the current wars scatter the same landscapes. Everywhere, there is death. It's impossible to play the game without feeling the crushing weight of mourning, of grief. Just watch. Here are some of my favorite moments where visuals and sound really just speak to me. It's beautiful and haunting and mesmerizing and thrilling. At first, I wanted to know every detail about the world. It was like a puzzle for me to solve. I pored over every screen, every interaction. Surely I could understand what happened in each of these regions. But as I neared the end of the game, my feelings started to change. Although I didn't know it at the time, I was only a year away from marrying my high school sweetheart when I played Hyperlight Drifter. And I couldn't put my finger on it then, but something about the game scared me deeply. Trudging on towards this goal, trying to right the wrongs of the past that were completely out of your control, clearly, visibly dying. At least to everyone, but the main character, who seems to wordlessly drag themselves ever forward. And when you finally reach your end goal, you face that horrible nightmare to save the surface world. Crawl back to where it all started, and in the stillness, by the fireside, you die. It's a sobering ending, and it sobered me. It was as if this game had read my thoughts and expressed them so beautifully and hauntingly before me. I was afraid that there was a rottenness in my soul. I was being consumed from the inside by a darkness that I could not express in words or explain to anyone else, though they all could see the way it affected me. And what I feared most was there in the game too. What if I achieve victory, whatever that means, and it does nothing to stop the disease that was eating at my very soul? No matter how many people I saved, no matter what wrongs I could right in this life, I would still die alone and forgotten. Getting married, working the job of my dreams, starting a family, all of it. Worthless. I replayed Hyper Light Drifter so many countless times because of this. Before I started recording footage for this video, I noted that I had 34.3 hours put into the game on Steam. A lot of that was playing through the story and getting achievements, yes, but there's a significant amount of that time that was just feeling. I was feeling the wordless messages the game had for me. Because ultimately, what I found after many hours of playing was not actually fear. That fear slowly, albeit very slowly, became acknowledgement, acceptance, and then catharsis. I wasn't alone. The proof was the game itself. Someone understood me. Part of the magic of Hyper Light Drifter is the contrast of the bright colors and the oppressive visuals and score. It's shocking at times, at other times it's beautiful. In some encounters you feel like a badass elite swordsman, and in others you get your ass completely handed to you. Sometimes the game fills you with fear, and other times with hope. The breadth of emotions the game exposes you to is part of what have helped me in my journey to uncovering the truth about myself and my depression. Now don't get me wrong, I've enjoyed lots of media throughout my life. I'm a musician and a writer. I draw, I whittled and carved wood. I love movies and books. But for most of my life, I would have these moments of deep sorrow when watching certain scenes from movies or TV shows or certain songs. I could never put my finger on what it was exactly that I was feeling. All I was sure of was the fact that I was on the verge of tears. But there was always something missing. It was never specific enough, or maybe even broad enough to actually capture the essence of what I felt. Hyper Light Drifter changed that for me. I saw and felt and understood that what was inside me was indeed existential dread, but also an existential hope. The welling up of emotions was this tension of the two, fear of death and recognition of the beauty of life held together with the fear of life continuing on after my death, and the recognition of the beauty of life continuing on effortlessly, even without me. In every area of the game, there are signs of the old life. The corpses of colossal machines litter the landscape, but out of their rotting flesh grows new life. At the same time, there are abundant signs of new life in each area. Trees and small critters scurry about in the forest or by the lakes. And yet there are signs of fresh death as the ongoing genocide of the inhabitants are displayed for all to see. This is a reality of life that holds a stranglehold on me in every waking moment. It's this dichotomy that gripped me as a young boy alone in the living room at night. The invisible border where light dies and darkness begins. But I think the ultimate message of Hyper Light Drifter is that death is not the end. In the face of unending death and cycles of violence, the will to survive and the hope of a better future is enough to persevere. And, most importantly, it's worth it. There is life that continues on after death, and that life is still as beautiful, if not sometimes more beautiful, than the life that came before it. It's okay to step into that long, eternal sleep. What happens next isn't your responsibility. You've done your part. You did what was right, or at least the very best that you could. That's all you can really hope for. A life well lived. We see scenes of the world renewed, the curse of the past is lifted, rivers of blood now flow with purified water. The sky of crimson death turns to bright and joyous blue. Though we may die, there is still a new day, a new chance at a purer and better life. What we do in this life affects what comes next. May what comes next be far more beautiful than what came before us, in part because of how we lived. I've never played a game like Yume Nikki. It is a singular experience, and it can only really ever be experienced once. That being said, if you have any desire at all to play it, stop the video and go experience it yourself. It does require a lot of patience, yes, but it's so worth it. I didn't play Yume Nikki when it first came out, though. I was online enough that I had heard about it plenty and had seen memes of it floating around. I even tried playing it once in 2012, but it didn't grab my attention. But in 2019, my depression was becoming unbearable. I still didn't know what it was yet. But after being fired from my first teaching job after 3 years, I was deep in the throes of depression. My usual coping methods didn't work, and my wife and I were barely making ends meet. I started having insomnia, and I would lie awake all night, dreading every moment, just praying and hoping to sleep. I started journaling to try and pass the time, but writing proved more frustrating than just lying awake, so I quickly gave that up. But then I saw that Yume Nikki had a Steam release. I remembered it from years ago, and figured now was the time to try it since I couldn't sleep anyway. What a strange decision it was, looking back on that time now. Yume Nikki is another game that has no words, but unlike Hyper Light Drifter, it doesn't have the pool of fast-paced action. This is simply walking in a dream. You have two states of being in Yume Nikki, being awake or in the dream world. When you're awake, you can go and stand on the balcony, play a super simplistic and boring video game, save your game, or sleep. That's it. If you try to leave your apartment, Barotsuki simply shakes her head. There might as well not be anything else in the whole world but this small one-bedroom apartment and your bed. You'll spend so little time in this space, you'll forget all about it before long. Besides, the game doesn't really start until you climb into your bed and enter the subconscious mind. There's been much written about and speculated about the dream world of Yume Nikki. This influential game spawned countless other games using the RPG Maker engine and has had lasting influence in the indie game scene to this day. People have dissected the themes and nuances of every single screen and background visual to try and make sense of the Wordless game. I will not attempt that here, because that's not what stood out to me about Yume Nikki. When I really dug into this game on those sleepless nights, I found something that words could not express. Fear, dread, horror, jubilee, rejoicing, catharsis. To get an idea of what it is like to play Yume Nikki, I'm going to show you some unedited footage of some gameplay I captured. Please, don't skip past this section. In fact, I encourage you to put on headphones. Go somewhere without distraction. Maybe sit in the dark in your room alone. Watch closely. Listen. But most importantly, feel. At times it's oppressive, others calming, maddening, soothing. You go on like this, exploring seemingly empty spaces, only a few landmarks to guide you. But as you dig deeper, you find new, more haunting places, secret, forgotten places, beautiful things, truly horrifying things. The game is communicating through sound and vision the inner mind of someone lost in the spiral of depression and isolation. I know this feeling too well. My depression worsened through the pandemic and in the ensuing years. Loss of family and friends, isolation, fear of dying, fear of spreading death. Yume Nikki in those long sleepless nights understood that pain. The ending of the game, though, has you finding all the effects the game has to offer. Other than specific random events that are super rare and often terrifying, there isn't anything else to do in the dream world. There was never anything to do in the real world either. And so the main character simply walks off the edge of the balcony. The ending sat in my soul with all the weight of its severity and cruelty. I saw a possible ending for me. Yume Nikki was the first step on the road to recovery from depression. I found myself staring down that lonely road one afternoon driving home. I felt a sense of excitement and contentment at the thought of simply driving off the edge. There were nights where I felt like a danger to myself, panicked, heart racing, crying on the phone with a stranger after calling the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. I knew it was time to seek help. I'd been living a fear-filled life for over 20 years. That late-night existential crisis had slowly slipped into every night crisis. Then it became a constant crisis. I was afraid. I was afraid of living. I was afraid of the weight and the responsibility of living. And most of all, I hated myself. But my ending did not have to match that of the game. My life did not have a programmed and fixed ending. If you find yourself resonating with anything I've said, if you too feel the pull of depression dragging you into the abyss, you're not alone. But there is hope. There is choice. Your fate is not fixed. The media I've talked about in this video, all of their endings are set in stone. They don't change. But that's not real life. You have before you an infinite ocean of possibility. It's terrifying, yes. But the best news of all is that no matter what you choose, there is beauty in the fact that you can choose. Like the drifter, you may be struggling with an unknowable pain, be it illness, grief, depression, disability, but you don't have to save the world. You don't have to face death alone. Like Maratsuki, there may be demons in your head that keep you stuck, forever isolated from the outside. But you don't have to stay there. You can open the door. So please, choose life. And if you can, in your time, when you're strong enough, use your life's experience to help someone who's struggling. You have no idea how important you are. The world is so much better with you in it.